It is time for Lesson 7 of the Earth Atmosphere topic. In today's starter, pause the video and think of 5 reasons why evidence may be good quality and another 5 reasons why it may be bad quality. Pause it now. Here we go. How much did you manage to remember from last lesson? Evidence is good quality if it came from experiments, the results of experiments, if the measurements were collected accurately, if they were collected over a long time for global warming and climate change so we can see the pattern, if they have been collected using a consistent method, and if the experiments have been peer-reviewed by other scientists to check it was correct. It may be bad quality if it's based on opinion or personal experience instead of evidence. If it's not based on measurements or evidence from experiments, it's probably bad quality evidence. It could have been funded by a company which may be biased. Maybe it hasn't been peer-reviewed by a range of scientists, so it hasn't been checked for its quality. If evidence is not credited, then you can't check who did it and whether they did it right. If it is reported selectively with only a part of the evidence shown, then that can be misleading. Today's driving question is, why are we so slow to reduce our carbon footprint? Climate change is a massive problem for the whole entire Earth, so why have we been so slow to do something about it? We have learnt that greenhouse gases trap heat in the Earth's atmosphere, like carbon dioxide and methane. They cause the greenhouse effect. They cause the Earth's temperature to rise. That leads to global warming. Global warming then causes climate change and increase in destructive weather events. Right, pause the video and check your understanding of the keywords. Pause it now. Let's have a look. A greenhouse gas traps heat in the atmosphere. Greenhouse effect, when the whole atmosphere traps heat, keeping the Earth warm. Global warming is the rise in temperature of the whole Earth. Climate change is the increase in destructive weather events, which are happening more often because of global warming. Here they are, lined up in the right order: 1B, 2A, 3D, 4C. Okay, now every country in the world is emitting, that means giving out, carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. And those emissions have increased a lot over the last 100 years or so. More and more greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere. Scientists help to keep track of the mass of carbon dioxide being produced so we can measure just how much carbon dioxide is going into the atmosphere. Mass is measured in grams, kilograms, or tons. For example, we could take some coal or charcoal and measure the mass on a balance. But really, we're interested in the mass of greenhouse gas which is going into the atmosphere. Now, sources of carbon dioxide include petrol, diesel, the fuels for ships and planes and trains. Also, when we burn fossil fuels in power stations to get electricity, the fuels burn and produce carbon dioxide. Also, our central heating runs on natural gas. That is a hydrocarbon. When that gets burnt, it produces carbon dioxide. So there are a lot of activities we do which result in carbon dioxide being put into the atmosphere. Now, we need to measure the mass of this, but what we sometimes do is, instead of measuring the mass of carbon dioxide, we measure the mass of carbon inside the carbon dioxide. So carbon has the symbol C, so CO2 contains carbon. Sometimes we calculate the mass of carbon that's being released. One reason for that is because some of the other greenhouse gases also include carbon. For example, methane, which is produced by dairy farms, amongst other methods, also contains the element carbon. C for carbon there. So if we measure the mass of carbon, then we can include carbon dioxide and methane and even carbon monoxide in that. So here we have carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, methane. They're all greenhouse gases. They all contain carbon. So for that reason, we add it all together and we measure the total mass of carbon that has been added to the atmosphere. Okay, so there we go. C for carbon. Carbon is in all 3 of these greenhouse gases. Now, what we do is we add the total mass of carbon added to the air from all of our activities which produce greenhouse gases. So we add together the mass of carbon from all our different activities. That then has a particular name. It is called the carbon footprint. Carbon footprint is the total mass of carbon added to our atmosphere as a result of all our activities added together. Okay, let's pause for a moment. In your own words, what is the meaning of carbon footprint? Think of a sentence, put it in your own words. Pause it now. Let's have a look at what I said. Carbon footprint is a measurement of the total mass of carbon added to the atmosphere as a result of all our activities added together. Right, now this chart shows the average carbon footprint from one household, one house full of people in different countries around Europe. And you can see here that the darker the purple colour, the bigger the carbon footprint. So the United Kingdom is not doing very well on carbon footprint. We seem to have a large carbon footprint. Every country in the world has a carbon footprint. That's a lot of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere. Now, the consequences of a large carbon footprint are more greenhouse gases added to the atmosphere, more greenhouse effect, more global warming, and then more climate change, more of the destructive weather events happening to the Earth. So climate events are getting more frequent and more severe, like storms, ice caps melting, floods, droughts, and forest fires. That causes a lot of damage to our environment, people losing their homes from floods, not being able to grow enough food because of droughts, forests being damaged because of the fires. And this is happening all over the world. You can see here that the darker the red colour, the bigger the carbon footprint of the country. So America, Canada, not doing very well. Australia, not doing very well. The oil-producing countries in the Middle East, not doing very well. So it's not just the United Kingdom. Every country in the world needs to consider its carbon emissions because we are all connected to each other. The climate of the Earth is connected all over the world. So the atmosphere above one country is connected to the atmosphere above all of the other countries. So emissions from one country affect every country in the world. Now, for this reason, we call this a large-scale problem. It is a global problem. It affects everybody right the way all across the world, a large-scale problem. Every country has increased its carbon emissions by a huge amount over the last 100 years. That means there is a high risk of environmental damage continuing. So we call global warming a high-risk large-scale problem because there is a very increased chance that this destructive pattern of events will continue because global warming is continuing and climate change will continue. Very high risk of that. Okay, pause for a moment and think of a sentence. Why is climate change considered to be a large-scale and high-risk problem? Pause it now. Okay, I'll show you my answer. I said it is large scale because climate change affects every country in the world. The climate of every single country is connected. So emissions from one country affect all of the others. The whole world is affected by this, so it is a large scale problem. The emissions from lots of countries continue to increase and have increased a lot over the years, so it makes it very likely climate change will continue. So there's a high risk of continued environmental damage because it is likely to continue because of the high amounts of emissions. Okay, now we talked about countries. We each have an individual carbon footprint, greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere because of our own activities. Now, some of the things we can do to reduce this are obvious. Using less petrol and diesel, so developing more electric cars and just using less cars and transport in general. Use less electricity because it comes from fossil fuel power stations. Switch our electricity to more renewable sources like solar power and wind turbines. Insulate our homes more effectively so we don't need to use our central heating as much. Stop deforestation, stop cutting down trees and plant more trees to help reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, or at least stop it going up quite so fast. Now, some of the activities which contribute to our carbon footprint you may not have thought about. There are other things we can do as individuals to try and decrease greenhouse gases. So stop charging your mobile phone overnight. If you are using more electricity than you need, that is coming from fossil fuel power stations. Greenhouse gases are going into the air. When you're buying clothes, they're probably coming from factories in other countries abroad. So they are quite often imported on planes, which burn a lot of fuel, bringing the clothes to our country. Take short showers and not long baths, right? Because electric showers use electricity from fossil fuel power stations. So try and take short showers for that reason. Eating meat. Dairy farms and meat farms produce methane, which is a greenhouse gas. So eating less meat is one way of reducing our carbon footprint. If we are eating fruit and veg, which has been imported from other countries, it's arrived here on ships. The ships burn fuels from crude oil, which puts greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So eating food grown locally helps to reduce our carbon footprint. Okay, memory check. Pause the video and think of all the ways we can reduce our carbon footprint. Okay, here we go. Use less petrol and diesel. Use less electricity. Switch electricity to renewable sources. Insulate our homes better, so we need less central heating. Take short showers. Don't charge mobile phones overnight. Buy less clothes which are made abroad. Buy food which has been grown locally, not imported on ships from other countries. Eat less meat. And stop deforestation and grow more trees. So look out for symbols on packaging which shows that anything like toilet roll, for example, has come from managed forests where they are planting more trees to make up for the ones that they have used. Now, why is if this is such a big problem, large scale, high risk, why has the world been so slow to reduce carbon emissions? Here's some reasons for you to think about. We don't like to change our lifestyles. We don't like to be restricted in the food we're buying or the clothes we're buying or the devices that we use. We are resistant to it. We don't like to have to change our lifestyle. Some people don't believe in this global warming and climate change evidence anyway. They choose not to believe the scientists, even though the evidence is really clear. All countries have economies that depend on imports and exports, transporting food, clothes, and other goods around the world. So they feel like if they stop doing that transport, their economy is going to suffer, and so they don't want to do it. Countries are competitive. Countries don't want to be the only country making a change if that puts them at a disadvantage. Sometimes governments then can't agree what to do about it or what size of changes to make because they think, well, if we're the only country who does this, then we're going to lose out. We can't risk that. And then they get a stalemate and then they don't agree anything. Sometimes countries agree to make some changes, then a different leader gets elected, and then they go back on what was agreed anyway. So there are a lot of complicated reasons why the world has not tackled this problem enough, and we also need to think about our individual lifestyles and what we can do to help. Okay, what is the correct definition of carbon footprint? Pause the video. Is it A, B, C, or D? Let's have a look. The correct answer was C. Carbon footprint is a measure of the total mass of carbon added to the atmosphere as a result of all our activities added together. It is time for the writing task. Please do remember the Google Doc in the Google Classroom is there to help you. If you go to the first assignment, which is the Google Doc exercise book, open the file, then you will scroll through to find lesson 7, which has got the driving question. It's got the statements for describe, explain, use, combine. It's even got the sentence starters to help you as much as possible. That'll speed things up for you. And it also means that myself and the other science teachers can have a look at your work and try and help make some corrections for you. So what is it today? Driving question, why are we so slow to reduce our carbon footprint? Describe how we can reduce emissions, explain the meaning of carbon footprint and the consequences of a large carbon footprint, and then use your understanding in detail to explain the scale, risk, and implications for our environment of climate change, and then try and think of the reasons why this hasn't been reduced. So here are the sentence starters. Please do put a good effort into your work and good level of detail. That means you'll be able to feel really proud of yourself afterwards for doing a proper job of it. So pause the video, take as long as you need in order to write some good detailed answers to these points. Go through it. Okay, I'm going to move this along to the answers. I hope you've managed to get a good level of detail into your answers. When you're checking it against these answers, please do, if you've got something wrong, just change it in your Google Doc. Here we go. We can reduce emissions of carbon dioxide and methane by using less electricity from fossil fuel power stations, switching to renewable sources like solar panels and wind turbines and tidal power, use less petrol and diesel for transport, use less natural gas for our central heating, insulating our homes so less is needed, eating less meat, taking short showers, stopping deforestation, buying food which has been grown locally, not buying so many clothes and materials that have been imported from abroad. Carbon footprint is a measurement of the total amount of carbon put into the atmosphere as a result of all our actions put together. We measure the amount of carbon because greenhouse gases contribute to global warming and because carbon dioxide and methane both contain carbon, so carbon is a suitable thing to measure. The consequences of a large carbon footprint are increased greenhouse gases, increased greenhouse effect, more global warming, and more climate change, more destructive events affecting our environment. So climate change is a large-scale problem. It affects every country on Earth. The atmosphere of every country is connected, so emissions from one country affect all of the others. And this is a large-scale problem that affects the whole Earth. Because every country produces greenhouse gas emissions, which have been increasing over many years, there is a large risk that climate change will continue. So there's a large risk that it will continue to be a problem because we're not doing enough to reduce our carbon footprints. The implications of that is that there will continue to be environmental damage. Homes can be damaged by flooding. Droughts can affect the amount of food that's been grown. Even the habitats of animals may be destroyed. There is a large scale, high risk of continued damage to our environment. So why are we so slow to reduce the problem? Well, we need cooperation between different countries, which doesn't always happen. Countries don't want to lose out by making changes if other countries don't because they are competitive. They don't want to affect their economies by reducing import and export. Sometimes they change leaders who don't want to change this problem. And we also need individual people, ordinary people, to make changes to lifestyle, which we can be resistant to. We don't want to use electricity. We don't want to change the foods that we buy and the clothes that we buy and the devices that we charge up. And we also rely on intensive farming methods to produce enough food for the global population. So changing farming methods might be difficult. It might restrict the amount of food. Some of the actions needed require investment of money in better technology like renewable energy sources, more electric cars, better battery technology for that, different alternative fuels. That can be expensive and require money to be invested. Okay, whatever level you've managed to achieve today, please do feel proud of yourself for the effort and for getting your science work done. That is really important to keep your education going, and you've done that today. So a big well done from me. Today I achieved describe how to reduce emissions of greenhouse gases. Today I achieved explain the meaning of carbon footprints and the consequences of carbon footprint. Today I achieved using my understanding to explain the scale, risk, and environmental implications of climate change. Today I achieved combine, so I can combine together a range of reasons why we have been slow to reduce global warming and climate change. As I said, a very big well done for your work today. Please remember to get the credit for your work. Go back to Google Classroom, go to the classwork tab, find the assignment for video lesson 7. You can now click mark as done or turn in. Whilst you're there, do the short quiz for lesson 7, multiple choice, doesn't take long, and that will test and check your understanding of this lesson today. Well done for your work, Year 9 and Year 10 Trilogy students. Well done for keeping your education going. It's really important and you're doing that. So well done for your effort. Thank you for your efforts. Well done, and see you next time for Lesson 8 and Lesson 9, which are the last lessons in this topic. So keep it going. Well done, Year 9. Well done, Year 10. Bye-bye for today.